My name is Tim Wenn, and I'll be discussing scarcity during the COVID-19 pandemic for my project. So I'm going to start out by talking a little bit about what scarcity is, followed by a little bit of background information on COVID itself. And then I'm going to kind of put the two together and talk about the scarcity of commodities in the market, as well as the scarcity of resources used to acquire these commodities. I'll then end off by talking about some future research I hope to complete, as well as a conclusion slide guiding you on where to go to ask any questions you may have. So what is scarcity? Scarcity can be defined really in two main forms. General scarcity is the state of being scarce or in short supply. And then there's economic scarcity, which is limited availability of a commodity in the market and or limited resources to be able to trade or buy these commodities. And this really stems from the fact that there's a finite amount of resources on Earth available to us to produce economic goods and services. And so any item that has an economic cost at all above zero is actually considered to be a scarce item. So when it comes to COVID-19, a little bit of background info that you should know is the first case was reported in December of 2019 in Wuhan, China. And then it was just over a month later, January 25th of 2020, where the first case was reported in Canada from a traveler coming from actually the city of Wuhan itself. Cases show both mild and severe symptoms, depending on the person, that can go all the way from just a fever and cough for a few days to actually in some cases leading to fatalities. And those with any underlying health conditions are at a higher risk of contracting the virus and having more severe symptoms. So when it comes to scarcity as a result of COVID-19, kind of putting the two topics that we just discussed there together, I really like to look at it from two different angles. The first is the limited availability of commodities in the market, and the second is the lack of resources to be able to trade for or buy these commodities. So when it comes to the limited commodities, they can be broken up into two major categories when it comes to COVID, healthcare and non-healthcare items. So for healthcare items, the physical items themselves, as well as the spaces, have been impacted greatly by COVID. So due to the increased hospital visits and increased stay time at these hospitals, there's been a real scarcity in the amount of space available for people who are ill to go, which has definitely been a big concern for patients. And then on the other side, for doctors and nurses, the scarcity of something like protective equipment, such as the N95 masks, have had to lead to some really improvised methods, like an unorthodox methods of trying to remain safe. And I know good examples in a Toronto hospital, they actually had to use kind of a modified scuba mask in order to try to keep their doctors and nurses safe and keep them from coming down and contracting the virus from patients. For us, more common consumers, hand sanitizers, wipes, and other items I'm sure you saw near the beginning of the pandemic were nearly impossible to locate at a store of some sort. And this can kind of tie into the next section here on the right side of the screen of non-healthcare items, such as toilet paper and canned foods, which due to the fear of sickness and lockdowns, the demand for this stuff just skyrocketed way higher than suppliers could keep up. And so this led to store shelves begin to empty and remain empty. And I know I can use myself as a great example. I've worked at a grocery store about 4 years now, and I've never seen anything like it. Walking up and down the aisles after the store had closed at the end of the night, seeing shelves, just toilet paper, the section just completely empty for 3 weeks at a time because we just couldn't get the supply in because they just couldn't make it fast enough. So now I just want to look at the other side of scarcity in COVID, which has to do with the resources Canadians have available to make purchases. And this often comes in the form of currency, which among Canadians has really dropped the available currency since the start of the pandemic. And we hit record numbers for the last decade here in the first 3 months of the pandemic alone, where 3 million Canadians ended up losing their jobs. And then due to the second and third waves, we have improved, but at battling this. But still, during the second wave, when we had our January lockdown here in Ontario and parts of Canada locked down as well. Canadians lost 213,000 Canadians lost their jobs just in that month of January 2021 alone, which is still a shockingly large number. And it's kind of a cycle that you get into, right? When people spend less because they're out of work, companies have less revenue, which means they can't afford to pay as many employees, which means they lay more off, which means there's more that have less to spend, and it's just a bit of a cycle. So the government has introduced some monetary policies, expansionary ones, of course, to help combat this, which is CERB is a really good example of where they actually pay every 4 weeks $2,000 to those who have been laid off because of COVID. So that went on for a number of months, which helped the Canadian economy kind of stay afloat during the hard times. For future research, I would love to look into how programs such as CERB that they've implemented to combat scarcity are going, as well as how other countries' programs to combat scarcity are going, and then kind of compare the two and see if Canada can maybe learn something from these other countries and implement that into some future strategies. And I'd also like to look into like the research of like historical events regarding scarcity and what some big events that have led to mass scarcity and how people overcame those and got out of those, and the paths they took that worked and didn't work, and really analyze those to look at what would be great for a path for the future for Canada, because I know I didn't find a lot of that at all in my research because we've never really had to deal with COVID before, so nobody really knows what the future is going to look like. But I think we could use history to learn a lot about what the right path would be for the future. So thanks for watching the presentation. If you have any questions, please post them in the discussion thread under the video, and I'd be happy to answer them for you.